After a week of people scared stiff about what could happen at Talladega, we get treated to one of the best races of the year and probably the best Talladega race in recent memory. Yesterday was action from start to finish with two wide racing all day, and even better, no major incident or controversy to speak of. We got one wreck the whole day, and I think that wasn't even that bad for Talladega standards, but we didn't have the big one. I've seen a lot of people really talking about they didn't like this race, that it was boring, and I'm just going to be really honest with you. If you are one of the people that thought that race was boring, I really think you need to maybe get into some other form of auto sport. I don't know what more you could ask out of that type of racing. Maybe you just don't like super speedway racing from the beginning. If so, fair. But if you are someone like me who loves super speedway racing, loves the strategy involved, this was a 10 out of 10 race. But before I really get too far into it, guys, if you could please like this video and subscribe to the channel, it would mean a lot to me. And if you want more daily NASCAR content, please follow me on Twitter and TikTok. But I don't know if maybe drivers were truly so scared to wreck the car that they were smarter with their moves and didn't go for bad blocks or over-aggressive bumping, but it was amazing to see. Obviously, you don't want the drivers so scared to wreck that the racing is affected, and I think Alex Bowman's concussion has all the drivers a little bit on edge, but at the same time, almost everyone drove smart and was respectful, and most of the field made it to the end of the race, and there wasn't even a crash at the line whenever the wind was coming down. It almost unheard of nowadays. And I mean, I'm sorry, it was just super refreshing. This is super speedway racing at its peak. This is how good this racing can be whenever it's not littered with avoidable wrecks. And I think that the fan opinion of super speedway racing today has gotten skewed by all of the wrecks and all of the just kind of boneheaded moves that have become commonplace at this racing. But this type of racing is an art form, and it takes a level of skill that is underrated. And I mean that. I'm not just being over dramatic. Yes, it equalizes the field and makes it so that every car is basically on the same level, give or take. That's why I think some fans like to kind of downplay these types of races, because you have guys like David Reagan, Michael McDowell, Ricky Stenhouse, these below average guys that are always competitive when we go here, and they say this makes it not good racing because of that. And I'm sorry, but that doesn't line up for me. I think what you have is guys that are obviously skilled. That's why they're at the top level. But you go to a track that equalizes all the equipment, and it makes it so that these guys can run up front and can contend, and they can play the mind games with the rest of these guys. It takes an innate skill to be good at restrictor plate racing. And, it's just like Kyle Larson is the best driver on earth, in my opinion. But he's not a very good super speedway racer. Same thing with Martin Truex. But then you got guys like Ryan Blaney. You've got, in my opinion, I think Chase Elliott is a decent restrictor plate racer. Yesterday kind of proved that. Denny Hamlin. There are guys that are good everywhere we go, that are always really good whenever we go to super speedways. There is a skill to this. There are people that always find their way up to the front. I mean, look at Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Dale Jr. They were both masters at super speedway racing in their days. And I think Ryan Blaney is easily the best super speedway racer we have in the Cup Series today. And if you want to talk about someone who always finds a way to the front, always is in contention, and very rarely finds himself losing at the end in a big wreck, it's Ryan Blaney. Watching Ryan Blaney bump draft is what I mean when I say this is like an art form. Because he's able to smoothly get on someone's rear and point them straight, but giving them the speed boost they need without turning their car sideways. And I mean, it's very admirable to see guys like Ryan who can do that, as opposed to guys who really don't know what they're doing sometimes, and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they finally turn somebody. And you then look at the amazing move that Chase Elliott made to pass Blaney, and it was so well timed, and the fact that each of them had a clean run to the line with no risk of wrecking themselves or the field. I mean, just chef's kiss. If you did not like that, I don't know what you're looking for. Quite simply. That race is proof that we can have these events without them being wreck fests. and can show off the skill that it actually takes to be successful at this form of racing without it being a wreck fest. While I don't want drivers being so scared to wreck because of the risk of injury to produce amazing content, I also think that this is proof, a little bit of proof, to the idea that maybe it's more on the drivers than they like to take credit for. I don't want this to be a situation of drivers feel like their lives are at risk, but maybe they did become spoiled by the amazing safety that these cars have had for the last 20 years. Maybe they started making bad moves and taking bad risks because they know worst case scenario was just a wreck car that their team has to fix. Now, and I know that this is kind of bad to say and I don't 100% agree with it, but I think it's kind of relatable to the point. Now there's a little more skin in the game for them. There is a risk of injury with this car, and I am not condoning that. I do not like that, but I think that this adds credence to what I've kind of believed for the last few years, which is that the drivers need to be taken more accountability for the just plain out horrible racing we get at super speedways. It's kind of like what they say about targeting in football. If they would just take the helmets off, they'll stop using their heads to make tackles. It's like an old thing. I know my grandfather would say it. I've heard people say it before, like, take their helmets off if they want to keep hitting each other. That'll make them stop. Well, it's kind of a metaphor I'm using to apply here, and it's kind of the same way. There are certain moves that have a high success rate and moves that have a low success rate. In the end, drivers are the ones making the decision on how much risk to take. Yesterday, we saw most of the field taking minimal risk. They took that minimal risk approach to the race, and it worked out great for everyone involved. Some will argue that not racing balls to the walls makes this an ineffective form of racing, but I just call that a type of strategy that's used in these races. It's not fuel, it's not tire strategy, but aggression strategy. You can choose to be aggressive like Stenhouse was, and turning Harrison Burton, and he always is, or you can be the perfect medium like Chase Elliott and Ryan Blaney were and found themselves winning both stages and at the checkered flag before everybody else at the end of the race. It's just how you want to choose to look at it. But at the end of the day, I hope that maybe this will become a trend and not an outlier, but we'll see. Did y'all like this race, or are you still not a fan of super speedways? Tell me what you think in the comments, and I hope y'all have a great day.